Here's a harsh truth about the agency space, and that is that most agencies aren't really agencies, but they're what I call glorified freelance businesses. Because that is how they started in the space, where they, as the founder, were doing great work as a freelancer. And so they hire some more freelancers to now help them. And while they're always busy hiring more people and doing client work, they never actually have the time to build the infrastructure or the processes to turn this collection of freelancers into a real business, which would then allow them to step out of it themselves and get their time back, or to take out more consistent profits, or even to exit the business one day because they've actually built something that is worth real money. So if you want your agency to function like a real business that can scale to 7 or 8 figures, then this is everything that you need to put in place when it comes to your finances. So let's go through it. At the very top, this is what might be the most important part to start with. That is your North Star, because every agency founder has a different goal. Maybe you want to have a high cash flow agency, or you want to have a high growth agency. Maybe you just want to have high profits that would really give you the highest valuation possible. Or maybe you want a little bit of everything. Whatever your goal is, that determines how you should set up everything in your agency. So let's go over this bird's eye view of it. At the highest level, an agency is clients with people who deliver on these clients, and operations that allow the people to deliver for the clients at scale. The clients result in money coming in, and the people in the operations result in money going out. This is where most agencies stop when it comes to their finances. They're just looking at how much money is coming in, how much money is going out. But this is exactly the trap that all the glorified freelancers keep falling into, because they don't have the actual infrastructure to capture the data and the KPIs, and even have the good bookkeeping that would allow them to answer all the strategic questions that you would need to be able to answer if you want to take your business to that next level. Because that is exactly what happens in the bottom part here. It is one thing for money to be coming in and money to be going out. But what you need to do is capture all of this data around your ICP, your offer, your pricing, the different team members that you have, your marketing performance, your general expenses. All of this needs to be captured in your bookkeeping and in your data and in your model, so that you can focus on the strategic questions, like which clients are actually your most profitable, how much churn you have every month, what the lifetime value is of different clients, what you should do with your cash, how you should approach your people, when should you hire, is your team actually busy or not, how far in advance should you hire when your sales pipeline is starting to rack up, how you should approach your operational strategy, what are the right margins that you should be aiming for, what budgets should you have in place, and most important, on your sales strategy, what is a good CAC to aim for, which channels are actually working, are you prioritizing upsells and cross-sells enough? Those are the questions, the strategic points that a real business just knows. And when you know this, you can optimize this. And every improvement you make on the strategic points, that is what results in more profits, which can fuel your goal. And then this becomes a cycle. Because now, if you keep optimizing every point in your agency, not just one point on how good you deliver, but on every point, how efficient your sales funnel is, how efficient your operations are, that is exactly what will then turn into this flywheel, this self-enforcing cycle that will allow you to have more profit, hire better people, spend more on marketing. You have more money coming in because you're getting better clients. Again, this results in new data. It reinforces itself, which results in different metrics, different strategic choices, which results in more profit if you make the right ones. And that is where a real business starts to shine, and you can actually have something that really starts to print money. And so what I want to do now is break these sections down to really give you a better understanding of what is required and how you can really think about that. So what we're going to start with is a breakdown of your agency cost structure. And that is what we have here. At the highest level, your cost structure is around your clients, your people, and your operations. One of the most common debates I hear in the agency space is whether it's better to have high-paying clients or just low-paying clients, do more volume, be super productized. Let me give you an answer here. It doesn't matter. We have clients that are extremely high ticket. They have clients paying them 30K, 50K, even sometimes up to 100K a month. And they are not necessarily more profitable than our clients with lower ticket clients, which is hard to believe, but it's true. And this explains why. Everything comes down to your cost structure design. You can have a high ticket business. What you see here is that you're going to have higher people costs. Let's say, maybe one 10K a month client, they are good with a 10K a month person and a 5K a month person, but these two people can only cover maybe 3 clients each because they're a lot more time intensive. And so what you'll find is that your per client cost might still be up to 5,000. Still leaves a good 5K in profit. But you also have a bit of a higher operating cost. You'll have a higher CAC on a client like this. You might require more software, may need to bring on a couple more freelancers, so more have like a better management, a quality control layer. So there's more cost there. And so still, a 10K month, you might still just be doing a 30% margin. Whereas if you have like a low ticket client at 1500, now maybe you can already get away with just having one 5K a month person, maybe like some freelancers that like, a 2.5K overseas freelancer. These people together, they might be able to cover 12 clients now. So your per client cost is only $600. Also, your operating costs are lower there. You have a much lower CAC and you don't really need much else, maybe some software. So your operating costs might just be also 425, which gives you a 30% margin. Now let's say you have a full stack agency versus a single service. So maybe there's 3 service lines here. They pay you 7,500. You have like 4 different people who as a pot can cover 5 clients. So you have 4K in client cost. Also, your CAC will be a little bit lower because it's mostly cross-sells. You do need some more software here to really make sure that everything gets delivered well. And end result, you're still at a 30% margin. All of these paths can work. What doesn't work is if you're in no man's land. We often see this with these 3K a month retainers, where you're just on that edge where you do need to have a good team. Maybe you still have like an actual 7.5K, local person. You might have a 5K a month account manager on it. And then still like, you can get away with like one overseas person who can cover like 8 clients. And so now your people cost might be 1,750. At this level, you do have still a pretty significant CAC. You do need some more software tools, more seats on these tools. And now all of a sudden your margin is only 8%. And so, of course, all of this is just as an illustration, but this is what we really see. It's like you can have extremely high retainers, but you will have higher costs. You can have very low retainers and still make a similar margin as long as your cost structure is aligned with it. So if you take away one thing from this section, that is that it doesn't really matter where your retainer levels sit, as long as your costs are matched up with it. Because if you're in no man's land, that is where it really starts to suck and it's going to be impossible to scale because you're never going to have the money you need to actually afford, more acquisition and to get the hires that you need. So yes, higher tickets, of course it's nice. You need fewer clients, fewer headaches. However, getting these high ticket clients is also much harder. And so if you have a great acquisition funnel, a low ticket business can actually be an amazing agency to run. That covers this part around how you should set up your clients, your people cost, and your operating cost. Now you've optimized how much money is coming in, how much money is going out. But that's just step 1, because every transaction gives you data. This data needs to be captured, and this gets captured in your bookkeeping. Most agencies, they do have an accountant who either maintains their QuickBooks or their Xero account. But let me tell you that 9 times out of 10, when we audit a bookkeeping setup, it is always filled with the same mistakes. So if you have QuickBooks or Xero, open this up now and open your chart of accounts, or you can just open your P&L and your balance sheet and look if it is set up in this way. Because as an agency, this is how your bookkeeping and your chart of accounts must be set up if you want to actually get useful data from it. And so first on the left here, we have your profit and loss. Now, when you set up your categories, you must always ask yourself the question of how much detail do I actually want in here that would influence my decisions. And so there's 3 important sections that live on a P&L, and most of the time we see that one of these is ignored. So starting with revenue, you should make sure that every unique service line that you have has their own category in chart of accounts. The worst thing you can do is just dump everything in revenue, so you have no way of knowing if you're making more money on your Google Ads service or your Meta Ads service. If you're only a single service agency, you might want to consider splitting this over a different layer. Maybe it's per country if you work in different countries, so like your US-based clients and your Europe-based clients, or it could even be in like a tier, whether these are your top tier 1 clients or your tier 2 or tier 3 clients. Find out like what is the right way for you to split this. But if you have different service lines, that is a must. Then we enter your cost of sales. This is everything that it takes to deliver the service. So think about your media buyers, account managers, designers, contractors, any delivery software. Like these are all the direct costs that you only have because you have clients that needs to be delivered for. Most bookkeepers and accountants just dump all of these people in operating expenses in a single payroll or salaries line. If you do that, you have no clue how your costs are trending. You don't know if you're overhiring, if you're overspending, and where your money is actually going. So make sure that your cost of sales are split from your operating expenses and that they are listed per significant cost category, so that when you pay your staff, this can actually be allocated in the right way and you can see month over month how these costs are trending. And the same counts for your operating expenses. Again, ask here, what are the main categories you're spending on? If you have ad spend, it's worth putting apart. If you just have like some smaller marketing costs, you might just want to have this in a single marketing category. But otherwise, your big costs where you're spending thousands a month, like a sales team, operations team, software, general expenses, maybe even payment fees, these are all costs you want to list separately and be tracked separately so that you can see the trends. Then, as an agency, your balance sheet is still incredibly important, yet almost no agency actually ever looks at a balance sheet or maintains this in the right way. What I have here is a simplified view of your balance sheet, but I want to walk through it so that you can look whether your balance sheet is set up in the right way. What we're going to start with are your assets. So as an agency, you often don't have that many assets. It's mostly the cash that you have and the receivables that you have. Those are your two main assets. Maybe you have something like company equipment if you're giving laptops, or you might even own the office. But for most agencies, it's just the cash and the cash that is owed to you. And so what you should have on your balance sheet are just every individual bank account that you have. Maybe even if you have payment processors, there should be a holding account for the money that's not paid out yet. What you should be doing is to set up a separate account for your taxes that are owed to you, so you can budget this, set this aside, and any pass-through holdings that you have from clients that they've paid you and that you now have to pay on the cost to deliver the service. You want to split that out so it's not in one bank account. And then your receivables, these are all the invoices you've sent out but that haven't been paid yet, so you can see exactly what is owed to you. When it comes to your liabilities, this is everything that you owe to others. So you want to list your credit cards in here, any line of credits that you've drawn from. You want to list your accounts payable. So when contractors or other vendors send you invoices, you want these to be recognized in your bookkeeping so that you can see what you have to pay to others. Also any taxes owed and any long-term debts. That's what you want to have in your liability so that you can always see exactly how much cash you have and what is owed to you and what you owe to others to make sure that you're still a healthy business and you're not actually in the red. And then lastly is your equity. This is just where the retained earnings go from the profits that you have every year, which you should hopefully have, and then the owner drawings. So if you're taking out money yourself or if you're putting money back in the business, you want to also see that in here. And that is how you make sure that your bookkeeping is actually set up in the right way so that all the data that is captured from your money coming in, the money going out is really captured well, and that you can use that to inform your strategy. As an agency, one of the most important parts to get right are your KPIs, because this is the single most important thing to look at to determine your future performance. So what we saw here is that your KPIs are mostly driven by the clients, the people, and the operations you have, and the money that's coming in and money going out as a result of it. When we capture all these parts, we can identify the right KPIs that will help you see where you're going. And that is what we can see here. So the first thing that is incredibly important is to recognize that a KPI is a key performance indicator. One of the biggest mistakes I see is founders using lagging indicators to track. And so these might be things as the revenue you had, your profit you had, how many clients you signed. These are all interesting metrics, but this is just what happened. This is not what leads up to what is going to happen. That is what you want to have in your KPIs. So one way that we like to do this for clients is to break them out in the primary sections that make up their business. So their client results, their sales, their marketing, operations, and finances. Here are some of the example KPIs that we always like to use. So we have how many client referrals we're getting as a measure of client happiness and success. We want to know the client sentiment, the performance, and the MRR lost. For sales, we want to know how much MRR is signed, and we want to know the pipeline value. On the marketing side, we want to know the qualified calls and qualified leads. For operations, we like to look at how much capacity there is and how well tasks are being completed. And for finance, we want to track the recurring revenue that is in place as a sign of the likely monthly revenue and the cash collected also on a weekly basis. Once we have these in place, what you can do is just every week you fill in how you're performing in relation to the target. If you do this every week, you might already have a management team. If you bring your management team involved in here, what you'll find is that your business starts to make so much more sense, because you're not just looking at outdated numbers anymore. You're actually looking at what is happening in the business right now. If you see a week over week change in your client sentiment, and you see that you'll see which clients are unhappy or why they got ranked at a lower sentiment level, you can step in before they result in a churn. Or if you see your pipeline shooting up because you went to an event, that is your trigger to launch the new job post or to make sure that your operations can handle the potential inflow of clients. Or if you see that your qualified calls are dropping, now you know maybe you should delay some of these costs. Or if your cash collection is much lower than expected, that again, if you're a bit tight on cash, can mean you have to revisit some of the expenses that are coming up. And so having the right KPIs in place is what allows you to always be a step ahead and not just be reacting to whatever happened in the last month. That was part 1 of this video on everything you need to know about your agency's finances. In the next one, we're going to cover all of the strategic points. So how you should be calculating all of your metrics, how you should be treating your cash, how you should approach hiring, operations, and sales, and what you can do here, like what the main levers are to pull in order to drive more profits. So hopefully this already gave you a lot of new ideas. Leave in the comments if you have any specific questions or any thoughts. If you want to chat about this, you can also book a call directly with me. As I said, that's episode 1. Episode 2 here will be next week. So any questions, let me know, and I hope you learned something from this video.